All right, everybody, this is Sheets, and welcome to Survivor Season 2021. And I actually have my first Survivor guest and just my own introduction, that he can introduce himself. So, I know a lot of people back from poker and whatever, and I used to be a big, like all of us were a big 2+2 guys and being on the forums. And actually, there's a 2+2 forum where they talk about survivor pool stuff, and this guy not only was I don't even know how much he still plays, but he used to be a semi-professional or he's a professional poker player. He also was a really regular contributor to the 2+2 survivor forum, and he actually reached out to me a couple of months ago and said, hey, if you're going to do a season preview, I'd like to get in on it. I wasn't even going to do one, and then I decided I was going to. And I said, I'll bring him on here. So this is Michael Jensen. He goes by the poker name and Twitter handle of Bravejayhawk. Just really quickly, what do you do for a living? What are you up to? Tell me what you're up to.
Well, when people ask me, Eric, I say that I play poker for a living, and then I try to quickly get off that, and I mention that I teach swimming, which is something I do. It's more I call it my fun job. Married, 2 kids. I like to play poker, and I like to do my survivor pools. I'd say that's how I,
Do you play? Do you do other stuff? Do you play? Do you bet on sports? Do you play daily fantasy? Do you play regular fantasy? Or
I'm definitely falling the fish category for the daily fantasy. I like button clicking and doing the single games on DraftKings. I do one fantasy season long pool with some friends from college, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I do not sports bet. I definitely fall in like the compulsive category, so I try to stay away from that. I have made some bets from time to time. I was on the Mayweather-McGregor fight very heavily on the right side, but outside of some outlier things, only maybe one bet a year.
Well, we're going to talk about that, about the possible biases people might have if they're sports bettors, and when people have sports betting opinions, how that can actually negatively impact their ability to do well at Survivor. As he not along with me, but just like me, and he plays a variety of different Survivor pools. We'll get into that, the difference between like small pools and big pools. And he also, I just want to just shout out to him. He's one of the more helpful people online with respect to giving advice. There are people that ask, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And he is kind of like me in that he walks a nice line between he'll yell at someone if they're being stupid, and also be very helpful in a constructive way. And it's kind of hard to walk that line when you're delivering content either for free or when you're getting paid for it. So Mike, let me ask you. He asked me, what are the talking points? And I figured I would just kind of wing it. But let's start with this. What do you feel? I'm operating on the assumption that most people know at least how a survivor pool works. I mean, I happen to enjoy it just about as much as anything on the face of the earth. It takes not all that much time. It's a nice little intellectual puzzle, and it's kind of cool because it seems for a beginner really, really easy, yet like most things, it's never as easy as you think. Let's start with this. What do you think, and I have my own thoughts on this, and we didn't talk about this before, what do you think are people's, I don't know, biggest weakness, or where do beginners really screw up with their approach to Survivor?
Like anything else, I think it's just like poker, where whenever someone asks a hand history, usually the answer is you should have folded pre-flop. And I found myself saying that a number of times. I know it's more of a joke among some people, but it really is actually true. The earliest mistake leads to a lot more mistakes. And in Survivor Pool, it's always week 1. And the reason it's week 1 is people tend to sort by the largest spreads more than any other week, unless the exception being there's a few people left and they just don't want to go out when they could take a better team. No one wants to get knocked out in the first week, which makes week 1 my favorite week, because the highest pick the highest favored teams, I feel, are more picked than they would be if it's, say, week 3 or week 5.
Well, you know what, Mike? I'm gonna even step back even further on a total macro level, and I'm gonna even expand on it this way. I think that the one thing that beginners or just casual survivor pool people just fail to recognize is the goal. Even though it's called a survivor pool, the goal in this thing is to win, right? And
Correct.
the goal is to win, and you can never win in week 1. And what people just try to do is to say, okay, how do I get through week 1? And then after week 1, they say, okay, so what's left? How do I get through week 2? I don't want to take anything but the biggest favorite. And you know what? Their logic is, you know what? I'll figure it out later. I'll figure it out later. If so, I have to use Kansas City week 1. No big deal. So I won't be able to use them later. Something will come up. But the way math works and the way just anything over a course of time and samples work is you run out of picks really, really quickly. And then what ends up happening is that someone will go out in week 7 or week 6 on some, hashtag fluke play, and like, oh, I got so unlucky, but I didn't realize they already were dead. You know what I mean? Like if they happened to have made it through week 6 or 7, they would have ran out of teams eventually anyway. And so I think overall, the main thing that people they really want to be plus EV in this stuff. You have to realize that the goal is not to just, and yes, you do have to get through each week to win, but you have to take the view that you want to win the whole thing. And even though it's called a survivor pool, you can't win it week 1. You can't, while you can in some form take it week by week, you have to take kind of that long-term view of the season. Is that fair?
No, that's absolutely correct. I think the mistake, it's so easy to make that mistake because when you're weighing, I know we'll get to this a little bit later, but you always know what your EV is for the current week, but the future EV or what your EV will be if you take some riskier picks earlier on is a lot less clear, which makes it very hard for some people to take that strategy because, I'm not really sure if that's giving me an advantage or not, because it is very hard to calculate. You don't know how many people are going to be left. You don't know if someone's is going to get injured. You don't know if some team's going to lay off and rest their starters, but you have to go with what you have in front of you. And it's a lot better to take risks earlier than take risks late when it comes down to it.
Well, and I would also say, I'm going to go on to what I consider the second, and this might be the first, I think that an equal leak that survivor pool people have, and this is a leak that people who actually know something about sports will suffer from more than someone who doesn't know a lot about sports. And that is this: when it comes to picking teams, all right, you have to make a decision at the beginning of the season or the beginning of your survivor life is how you're going to assess a team's chances to win. In other words, are you going to be the person who fights Vegas, or are you going to be the person that respects it? In other words, are you the type of person that's going to say, okay, I know that, Chicago is a 7-point favorite over Detroit, but you know what? Chicago quarterback sucks. So a 7-point favorite for Chicago is for some reason different than a 7-point favorite for Kansas City because I know Mahomes is really good. Or likewise, do other stupid stuff like I know that Chicago is a 7-point favorite over Detroit, but they're rivals. I don't want to play a 7-point favorite over a rival, as if there's a difference between that 7-point favorite and another one, or even more complicated. I don't want to play them in a division game, or I don't want to play them on the road. I hear that too. It's a difference somehow than playing a 6-point road favorite as opposed to a 6-point home favorite. So the question that you have to really accept when you or deal with before you go into this is how much, if at all, are you going to insert your own biases and your own opinions on top of what Vegas tells you, or not what Vegas tells you, what the implied odds of winning are as as Vegas is describing to you. And again, I went probably a lot more detail than I wanted to in that overall explanation. But you want to expand on that a little bit, or talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the first comment I'd make, I don't know if my face is being showed for this video, but I definitely started to laugh when you started to say all the hedges that people had for certain situations, because the times I get upset on 2+2 and either mute someone, block someone, or never reply to their posts again is when I take the time to, because I like this more for the puzzle aspect. I see it as one big puzzle. I mean, the money's obviously very important, but it's a really good brain exercise. And when I'm out of all my stuff, if someone reaches out for help, I'll help. But I hate when I go through the time and then I get all these buts. And you mentioned all of those. The mistake, there's two mistakes with that. First, is one individual know more than what the handicappers know? And that's obviously false. The second thing is those people are bringing in all these extra variables when they're making their decisions. And that's just a huge mistake. Why would you want more information to have to sort through to come to a decision on what your pick is for this week? If anything, that leads to a lot of regret in the end when you make your selection, because you might go back and think, oh, I shouldn't have done this because of this. But the reason you made that pick was because of this other thing that really didn't matter. I like throwing all of those things out and going based on the pure win odds and where I want to set myself up for later. And I really don't have any regrets. I probably react worse than most people do, even early on the season when I lose a certain way. Usually, like when Dan Quinn kicked that field goal on the 1 or 2 yard line in week 10 that one year, I was so appalled. I didn't even yell. I mean, it was insane that he would actually do that. But when you bring in all of those biases, underdog, being on the road, a division rival, it just makes it so much more complicated. I don't overcomplicate something that isn't that difficult. Take the lines, take the win odds, and go with it from there. Right. I don't have a favorite team either. I mean, I root for the Chiefs, but growing up, I didn't have a favorite football team. So it was very easy for me not to let that creep into my subconscious for making my decisions on my picks, because I really didn't care who won. It makes it a lot easier when you don't have a favorite team, because those biases don't exist.
So let's get to, again, when I go through my my Survivor Pool stuff week by week, I always remind people of kind of what I feel what's most important, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it, which we kind of alluded to a little bit. There's really two main decision points, or two main considerations that you have to figure out each week between what's a good Survivor pick. Now, we're not going to talk about specific types of pools yet. We're going to presume that it's your standard pool, single entry, not single entry, but one pick per week,
yeah,
for a little while. And the two components, and I'm pulling up right now the Survivor grid. This is from last year, but they'll update it for this year also.
I have team rankings up to this season.
Yeah, the two main things you have to consider are something called, well, either EV or what's called immediate EV and future value. So I'll let you take a shot at this first. Why don't you explain what immediate EV is?
Immediate EV, you're going to explain it better than I am, but
maybe.
It's a combination of your win odds with the popularity of the pick. No consideration for future weeks. This week and this week only. A team could be a 21-point favorite, but if 99% of the people in the pool are taking that team, you have very low EV, because if you lose, everybody's out of the pool, and whoever else picked anybody else is going to win the pool. So in that extreme of a scenario, you're better off taking the 21-point underdog if every single other person in the pool took the 21-point favorite. So basically, it win odds with combined with pick popularity or assumed pick popularity percentage because we're guessing in the week ahead.
Yeah, so I don't know, I couldn't have explained it that much better. The concept that he's alluding to here is one that if you're following me on for daily fantasy sports, you're very familiar with, and that's the concept of leverage. Okay, the idea that a team's win odds is important, but how often other people in the pool are going to be picking that team is equally important. And the combination of those things is what makes your immediate EV. And as Michael was saying, if you have two teams, one of them which is a 2-to-1 favorite, one of them is pick'em, but the 2-to-1 favorites being picked by 90% of the pool, you're having extreme leverage, extreme negative leverage picking that team. Where if you're picking a team that's pick'em or even a small underdog, for example, that no one else is picking, you're getting a much better deal from an immediate EV perspective. And
Eric, if I could jump in really quick with it, a good example from last season. I know you're aware of this one. I did one entry in the Circa last year, and I did it with 3 of my friends. I gave them a free roll, and we did the picks together. I obviously said that I have overall final decision, but I told them prior to the first week, we have to pick the Thanksgiving Day game in this particular pool. You look at the games; those are really important because if you use up all those teams before you get to Thanksgiving, you're out. The Cowboys were a prohibitive favorite at the beginning of the season. Obviously, that changed, but at the time they were 9-point favorites. I told my friends we are not picking the Cowboys in week 9. Or for Thanksgiving. We're just not going to do it. So I wanted to prepare them mentally for it. The way it shaped out, the Pittsburgh game was canceled, remember, so there are only 2 games to choose from, and it was very simple. There you had 2 3-point spreads, and in this situation I was very lucky that I had friends or partners that I was doing it with. I told them they can choose, but they had to take the Lions or they had to take the football team. I wanted to take the Lions for the simple fact I thought less people would take the Lions. All 3 of them wanted the football team. The Lions lost, the football team won, and we advanced. It was my EV for that week was 1.9, I believe, or 1.8, and all I had to do was take a 3-point underdog, and it worked. It worked out really well. So it's a really good example. It's hard to see that in a full week because why would you never take an underdog in almost any scenario in like week 5. But if there's only 2 games and they're both 3-point spreads in a $1,000 buy-in where you'd think people would be a little bit sharper, and they were, but that week they were a little risk adverse, and I guess maybe they didn't want to get eliminated on Thanksgiving.
you know what? And the thing is that there's many tools out there that allow you to give you the answer to this question.
Oh, yeah.
Of what the immediate EV is. I happen to have Survivor Grid up here, but there's zillions of them out there. And the Survivor Pool Grid, this is for 2020. It actually, like if you go, it actually says what the EV is and what the EV. Now, what they presume, and this is important, is a certain win percentage, which they probably take straight from Vegas, from the Vegas lines, okay, and popularity percentage. And what they do is it depends on the settings, but they take just kind of an overall population pool of all the different pools out there in either Office Football Pool, RunYourPool.com, Yahoo, I think a couple of others. And depending on the settings, it'll tell you what the popularity of these teams are. And it's just a very simple calculation that, between figure about having win percentage as a function of popularity, and it comes up with this EV. Now, again, later on in the week, these numbers are going to be more accurate just because popularity, again, the more people that enter into any population sample, the more likely the total sample is going to be accurate, right? So the longer you go in the week, the more likely the population and the popularity number is going to be accurate, which means the more likely the EV is going to be accurate. But you could, if you wanted to be, I don't want to say lazy, not even lazy. You don't have to do your own EV calculations. Go here and just rank these things by EV. Now, before we continue, remember what's going into EV. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. The win percentage, we're going to assume that what's going into the win percentage is the best that we're going to do. In other words, we're putting in the Vegas implied money line, which is, what the public is just pricing in as the money line. Now, again, you could argue that, well, sharp money is this, and yeah, it's possible that that's not accurately what the money line is, but for me, it's the best I'm going to be able to do, right?
And if anything, it's close enough.
It's close enough. And as far as popularity goes, if the bigger the pool is and the more people are left, the more likely that popularity number is going to be accurate. Okay. Now, as you get down towards the end of the year and your particular pool is down to 15, 10, whatever many people, then you get into end game stuff, which is fun. Then you get to actually figure out who everybody's got left and figure out what they're likely to pick. And then you think, ooh, if they know I'm going to pick that, maybe they're going to do something else. And that's when it gets really fun. You can put your own popularity numbers in. And that's when you're dealing with team rankings and other tools where you're allowed, you could do that. But for the purpose of getting to that point, okay, you're talking about two, I think, semi-tight numbers, between the win percentage and even the popularity numbers are usually pretty tight. So the EV number that you're going to get is pretty damn close, you know what I mean, to what it's going to be. So if you wanted to just rank teams by EV, you're getting, pretty up-to-date data, right? Because the game is right now. You're getting popularity data that's up to date because it's kind of right now. And so this EV number is pretty dead on. However, and this is I think what makes it all fun. The EV piece is input one, right? And that's the one you can quantify. That's the one that's pretty easy to verify or whatever it is. But input two is future value. So why don't you tell everybody what future value is?
So this is definitely my favorite part. And I mentioned that I like survivor pools because of the puzzle aspect to it. The future value part is what makes it a puzzle. And there's a lot of variables. I never try to think about who's going to get injured. None of that stuff matters. I take it as it is right now, as the season is playing. If I play in pools with larger amounts of people, it makes it a lot easier. If you play in a pool with 20, I think the decisions are a lot harder, and I would have a much more difficult time deciding who I might take early on in the season because there aren't very many people to start. You start with a bunch of people, this thing's going, if not the distance, very close. You want to have picks later in the season on teams that are heavily favorited and a lot less available by your opponents. And that's where the future value is, being on the highest favorited team that no one else has left. So you might be giving up some immediate EV or some immediate win percentage by taking some chances earlier in the season to have that 14 or 17 point favorite late in the season that maybe no one else will even have. And that does happen. I have some examples like I could mention later that I put myself in last season. I took chances to get there, but it felt really great when I was there because you're on a lone pick on the best team of the week. It's a great feeling.
So what happens is when we talk about future value, you want to pick teams now that have the lowest amount of future value to you. Okay, that's the ones you want to burn now. You want to reserve those teams that have high future value. Now, as I mentioned, it's very difficult to quantify future value. So like on some of these sites that'll give you like a stars, like 5 stars, 4 stars, 6 stars, whatever it is. And okay, that's better than nothing. But there's really no answer to this, which is kind of makes it fun, is how much like immediate EV is worth giving up in the name of future value, and how much future value are you gaining by saving a team with high EV? And that is, and to me, and that is what makes it fun. What Mike and I do, and what a lot of people do is they will plan out the whole season, and they will say, okay, this is my path to victory. You know what I mean? Before week 1, as soon as the schedule is released. Like people are saying, okay, how am I going to get to the end? Now, again, along the way, as they like to say in analytics, shit happens, right? And people get knocked out, and people have there are less teams left available than you thought there were going to be, and things change, and people get injured, and all that stuff. But you start with kind of like this overall mapping where you say, okay, I am going to be saving this team until then, and that's a very, very, and this is what makes, again, kind of the whole thing fun.
Yeah, the reason I like it so much is I mentioned earlier, it's very hard to quantify what your future value will be based on your current decisions. We have no idea. I mean, we can calculate it once we get there, but a bunch of different things can happen along the way. Like, I mean, last year they literally were changing the schedule, and games were moved from 1 week to the next. And in 1 week, it certainly had an effect on what your map was. I think it was the Chargers, but that doesn't matter. I'm looking as a broad example. I'm looking at the team rankings right now, and Baltimore is a really good example of a team that they have they have 5 excellent plays throughout the season as it stands right now. Oh, I'm sorry. That's last year's. I was following along, but no, they still are one of those teams. Actually, Tampa Bay is a better example. Tampa Bay has lots of very good plays, but everyone wants to have good teams for the end. I mean, look at Tampa Bay. They are a play the last 4 weeks of the season as it stands right now. There's just no point to use them early on. Each week you pass them up, your opponents are going to take them, and you don't just have one spot. A lot of people like to say, oh yeah, but you don't know where Tampa Bay is going to be. Well, Tampa Bay is one of the favorites in the NFC. We have to assume that they're going to have, be in the running at the end of the season. Let's keep them for their 4 games against New Orleans, at Carolina, at the Jets, and versus Carolina. I mean, why wouldn't you don't have to save them for 18. You have a choice of 4 weeks. And all you have to do is just not take them a few times early, and you have a lot of choices late.
Yeah.
So the ones who are, a little shaky and a little uncertain, that should be an easy thing, to really look at, say, oh, that makes sense. I should set up that future value because I'm not hoping for 1 week. I mean, you could take Tampa Bay every single week starting at 11 the rest of the season as it is right now. Now, San Francisco is a different example. Their best 2 plays are weeks 1 and 17. Now, I'm not taking San Francisco in week 1 at all. We'll go over that later, but I'm not doing it because I want to save them for 17. That's preposterous. I might use them, but I'm not saving them for 17. They might be worse than Houston by that time. We don't know, but I'm just not saving them for that because I probably won't be taking them in 18 or 16 because they're at Tennessee and at the Rams. There's less options, so there's less reason to save them because you'd be hoping for one spot or not use them at all.
Well, one thing I want to stress to people is again, if you do want to overweight future value, just remember that the further in the future, right, you are saving teams for, or that you're considering, the more variance, the more shit can happen between now and then. So that's the weighting aspect. Like if you make an a decision based on immediate EV only, yes, you are getting more certainty. And if you are making a decision based on future value, I will say that if you save a team in week 1 because you're going to want them in week 5, it's a little more assured than saving the team in week 1 because you want to use them in 16, right? Because 16 weeks just provides a little more opportunity for that to happen. And we've seen this so many times that we would fade a team in week 1, knowing or thinking that we were going to be, pounding them in week 9. And then by the time it's week 9, the team's not even playable, Yeah. And so these are this is kind of what makes it fun. I'm going to throw one other thing out there, which I consider I consider it kind of super advanced, but I guess people are experts. Think about this. So here's another thing you can think about with future value as it relates to immediate EV. So this is what some people do, and you got to think about this. Let's say there's a team you want to save until week 15, for example. They rate to be a really, really good play week 15. They're kind of a weak team, you know, whatever it is. And you have a chance to take them and say like week 3, but you say, you know what, they're clearly should be saved for week 15. Okay. So you save them. But the thing is, if you think about it, in week 15, and you think about this in week 3, everybody is going to have them available because nobody is going to want them. And they're going to end up being like 70% owned, right? If they're as a result. So actually, and when you're saving them for a spot where you're going to fade them anyway, you know? So think about that kind of stuff. And so it's like, whether they might look like they have high future value, they might not actually have high future value for you. You know what I mean? Like if you are going to wait, and you know, if you're going to save a team for week 13, but then like in week 13, they're just going to be a fade because 70% of the people that have them are going to be playing them, then maybe, just maybe you want to burn them earlier, you know, because the future value to you when you factor in the EV that you're going to be giving up if you play them in 15 makes it kind of interesting, you know. So again, I love Survive.
Let me throw in one more example for the people who are a little apprehensive, because it's a hard sell to say you shouldn't take this team in 1, 2, or 3 because you really might need them in 15 through 18. That's a hard sell for someone that is on the other side of the fence. But there's this one example from a pool about 5 years ago that I was in. I think there were around 20, 30 people left. And my partner and I had, I think it was the Colts, but it really doesn't matter who it was. One other person had this team available. And we were on week 13. Week 14, they were 14-point favorites. So only 2 of us had them available for the following week. But they were also the biggest favorite for the current week. I think they're like a 10-point favorite, something around there. Now, well, obviously we didn't take them because we could take a 7-point favorite instead of them as a 10. And in return, we're gonna for the next week. I mean, the pool's not over. I mean, there's no way this pool's ending this week. I mean, like for those that say, oh, I never look ahead. Well, you have to look ahead in this scenario because there's like 30 people left. The pool's not going to be over. It's almost impossible. The next week, we had them available at 14. The other person took the Colts in 13. They wanted the biggest favorite. So the next week they had a 7-point favorite, and we had a 14. They basically get traded off 4 points of point spread. And all they had to do was drop down 3 to gain 4 overall. And that's really silly. That's a really big mistake when all you had to do was look literally 1 week ahead to see who am I picking next week. Oh, I could have the Colts at 14 instead of this other team at 7. And what happened was that I don't know if they won or lost, but they ended up being on a group at 7 when they could have been at a pair with just me and my partner at 4 as a 14-point favorite. If anything, you at least got to look a week or 2 ahead. And that's a good example to try to convince those that are apprehensive. Just, you know, look 1 or 2 weeks ahead. Don't think 12 weeks out. That's hard to do. At least look 2 weeks out.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised how easy it is to actually do it, to look 12 weeks out. I mean, like if you could there are tools where you could you could plot it out, and it's kind of fun to do, like to make those plans. And now again, when you have pools that most big pools nowadays I think when they have double picks and things like that, then the real fun happens. If you don't think that you can knock people out, I mean, we knocked out like hundreds and hundreds of people in 1 week a couple of years ago. When you get double picks involved, we had a pool. I'll talk to you about this offline, where we got it from like 472 people down to 2 in like 1 week, and we ended up chopping for like $1 zillion.
Oh, I almost have that story. I'm not going to bore people online. But I will tell you afterwards. It's just as bad, but I was on the wrong side of it.
Yeah. And even like something small, I mean, you get enough leverage. I mean, I told you, I won one of the 2+2 pools a couple of years ago. Just there was one just in 1 week. There was like Miami was at Indianapolis or something, or vice versa. I forget what it was. And knocked out like the last 17 people in one freaking shot. You know, you put yourself in a position where
I know which one that was. Was that one on nitrogen?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna. The reason that's an important one. I was on a cruise that week, and I was making my picks at the airport. If people unfamiliar on the Nitrogen Sportsbook site, you cannot change your pick once you make it.
Right.
Very, very extreme stress.
That's
lot
rough.
of anxiety just making a pick.
Yeah.
That's some great story. We should have a story podcast about survivor stories, because I got a lot of them. I fully faded this Colts game that you're talking about on all my non-nitrogen pools for the most part. But
right.
but on nitrogen I almost faded them. But I did not do it. And I did take some other teams that week. I think Chicago was one of them.
Yes.
It was a bloodbath week.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, "Oh my God, I would have chopped it with sheets if I did that."
Yeah.
But I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I assume you and I would have chopped it. I didn't know you then, but that was one of those Bitcoin ones.
Yeah. All right. So let's like, for example, I mean, I don't know. Let's take a look. And here's another, by the way, kind of an interesting site that I don't know if you know this one, but this is a weird site. So survivorpicks.com. What this does, this is actually really cool. This actually projects ownership in future weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which is really, really neat, you know. And again, it presumes that, you know, lines are what they're supposed to be or whatever. But that's
crazy.
Yeah, this is kind of neat. And the way I kind of look at like mapping and stuff in general is you rank teams. Now again, it's probably better to rank them by money line as opposed to spread, but it's the same thing. So what I like to do is I like to look also at see like where like there's like a spread. In other words, like week 1, you see like a bunch of teams at 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
Like you see like in week 2, you have like Cleveland is like 4 points, you know, better than the next one. You know what I mean? So like so it goes one of two ways. Number one is you know, if Cleveland were an option in week 1, you'd probably save them. But you know, on the other hand, you know, week 2, Cleveland's going to be a great option from, you know, just a winning chances perspective, but they're probably going to be really popular also, you know. So give me some thoughts that you have on the season.
Going off what you just mentioned, I love looking for the key weeks. The key weeks being what you're talking about, where there's maybe a big drop off or a really scarce week. Week 12 is a really good example.
Let's talk about that one. What about week 12 makes that interesting?
Week 12's great. Again, everyone's gonna say, "Oh, well, things can change." Well, they can, but it's really fun if you plan for something that holds. And this actually happened last year, the same exact week. I believe there are only one team favored by more than 6, and of course they all won, which was extremely frustrating when I picked all the good ones, the sharp picks, and then everyone wins anyway. But in week 12, as it is right now, there's only 3 teams that are favored by 4 or more. Now, Miami, everyone's going to have them available. As it is, week 9, they're a play. So everyone's going to have Miami in 12, which means you're probably not going to want to take Miami. And this is how I like to think of it, because if I'm not going to take Miami, I got to make sure I'm going to have somebody else. Yeah. If I'm not taking San Francisco in 1, but would I even want to take them in 12? Well, probably not, because they're going to be heavily available and they're going to be there too. So between those 3 teams, I'm going to want Dallas. You know, right now as it is, I would take Dallas for that week, because Dallas has a bunch of possible plays where they'll be less available than the other 2 teams. But what I'd probably end up doing is taking like Chicago at Detroit or something. You're only dropping off a couple points. But I like looking for key weeks and to set up those weeks. A lot of the times it's going to change dramatically, but you have to go with something. If you don't go with anything, you're going to end up making the same picks as everybody else. You're going to be on the sheet picks every single week. And if you make it to the end, you're going to split it you're going to split it maybe dozens of ways. And that's really not nearly as fun as winning the entire thing.
What week is Thanksgiving?
12.
Oh, that is week 12. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because
Um,
in some of the pools, again, they require you to make a pick on Thanksgiving, right?
which is, yeah, for the Circa, that's going to be a fun one. That's a week I'll be, for the Circa 1K, and this is a Las Vegas pool, you have to be in Nevada to do it. You have to pick the Christmas Day game too this year, and that's an extremely key week because Cleveland is one of the games, and there are a lot of Cleveland spots. But it's simple. My hope for that pool specifically, because of the rules of the pool, you have to pick one of those two games on Thanksgiving. I believe they're both 2-point spreads. Cleveland's got a lot of spots. They're not going to be very available when it gets to week 16, I think it is, at Green Bay. I think it is. There's 30 people left. I might be the only one Cleveland left. So I'm not going to take any Cleveland at all probably until Christmas Day. I probably won't make it there, but if I do make it there, I'll be set up very, very well. But not thinking too far ahead, week 1 is obviously the most important week because it's the first week, but it's the most important week because I think a lot of people heavily lean toward the favorites in the first week. They're buying in for, let's say $300 to all their pools. No one likes getting knocked out. The first week, just like no one wants to go broke the first hand of the poker tournament. So they'll play overly conservative and play a hand incorrectly, or in this case, make a pick incorrectly to preserve their the entertainment experience, to at least the second week. I always fade the heaviest pick teams in the first week. There's almost no exceptions. Seattle's been my kryptonite in the last 10 years. They are always a 10-point favorite, and they always win in the last few minutes, the fourth quarter, and it's absolutely infuriating. Before I mention mine, do you have your favorite picks for week 1 yet?
No, I really haven't even looked. I really didn't even think about week 1 yet. I just kind of wait as long as I can with respect to the odds and things like that.
This doesn't give people a great value, but the way I do it, I love the schedule release day. I get really excited when the schedule comes out. I get when the spreads are released, I make a spreadsheet with the spreads for every single week, and then I start mapping in April. And then after I find something I like, I step away from it until August. And actually, I'm starting up. I should have started a couple days ago, but with 2 kids now, it's a little bit harder to find a few hours here and there because I put way too much time into this thing. I get a lot of satisfaction.
Michael, you have no idea. So
I got a lot of mental satisfaction from this.
So Michael, you have no idea. My partner's a guy I know from college, right? And I literally I don't speak to him like 7 months out of the year, and for 5 months I think literally like there's like 15 texts a day back and forth on Survivor.
I have my own Telegram group chat with my partner and then and my other friends, and it's a lot of fun, but it starts right now. And I've actually been pretty lucky in week 1. I really haven't experienced that much loss in week 1, other than loss of value of entry, not loss of entries. But there's a few picks out there. There isn't much out there in pick percentage right now. There's Yahoo has something up. They're showing the Niners at 24%. I don't like Yahoo for their pick distribution percentages, but they always come out first in the week, so I look at it for that reason. But I think of teams in terms of fading and saving. I'm going to fade the Niners. Nothing against them. They're just going to be the heaviest pick team. Why pick a 7.5 point favorite when I can pick a 4.5 point favorite that's going to be picked? You know what,
Michael, I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is really, really important. Okay, I don't even know if we talked about this offline or online, but back from your poker days, it's. And I remember when I used to, I used to teach poker as well. What happened is people would bring me a hand. They would say, okay, I have this, and now I'm on the turn. What do I do here? I'm like, well, you should have folded freaking pre. You know what I mean? Yeah, why you bring that to me now? And the thing is that pre-flop play in poker, those errors compound, and they compound in a way that it's kind of tough to do anything about, like you get forced into down these paths because of the error you made early. And what Michael's kind of getting at is that week one is a real fine week to screw yourself over really quickly, like, and what happens is you make a bad play week one that gets there, right? You get there, you win, and whatever it is, and you're in week 6, and all of a sudden you wonder where the hell you went wrong. And it probably was back in week 1, and you didn't even realize it, and
I see that every once in a while on 2+2, where someone says, who they're choosing between. And
right.
Sometimes I know exactly where the mistake was. And it's usually because I say, oh, you shouldn't have took the Chiefs in week 5 or 7, even though they didn't pick they didn't even show their picks, because it's just obvious. Like if you take Tampa Bay if you take the Chiefs in week 1 this season and Tampa Bay in week 2, you're setting yourself up for a lot of hurt. And some would be like, oh, but the immediate EV is really good. 7-point favorite and low pick percentage. Yes, that's true. But when you look at the hot chart here, these two teams are a play almost every single week. Yeah. And they have great plays at the end of the season. So even though their immediate EV is going to be very high, you need those teams for later. If you take them weeks 1 and 2, you're gonna be hurting when it comes to probably like week 14, or certainly the last few weeks of the season, when most people they might not have both of those teams, but they'll probably have one of them. You have to think of ahead, and that's the difference between the immediate EV and future EV. The immediate EV is going to be excellent on the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Buccaneers for week 1, but those are complete save teams. I mean, there's no reason to take any of those teams for any reason whatsoever. If anything, use them for the middle of the season, but you just can't use them for week 1.
One of the reasons, by the way, and this is another thing that beginners do sometimes. It's not beginners or whatever, but one of the other reasons why San Francisco is going to be pretty popular also is what people like to do is they take like a key bad team and they try to bet against them like every single week. Like they'll say, okay, Detroit's going to be really, really awful this week. So I'm just going to just pick whoever Detroit's playing, and all Detroit's got to do is go 0-16 and win. And first of all, that's not accurate because
but even if it's true, there's
because they play some teams twice, so you can't.
Oh yeah. But if it sets up that way for the end of the season, it's just a bad mentality, because you're going to be doing that with 12 other people, and you need to find. It's about finding a unique path to victory. Now, I'm going to write a really fun. This is the last point I wanted to make that I have written down in my notes. Yeah. The reason I like week 1, if ever there is a week, and I'm going to be very careful not to be a fish here, because I am not a handicapper. I'm not pretending to be. But if there is any week of the entire season where the handicappers are going to be wrong, it is week 1. I mean, you just don't know exactly how these teams, if they're going to be good or bad. The best example is the current Kurt Warner-led team for the Rams. When he came in, he had never played in the NFL before, and they won the Super Bowl that year. They were like 500 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. I mean, like 400 to 1. So if ever there's a week for the handicappers to be wrong, it would be week 1. So I just personally hope that they're wrong for the highest favored teams, highest pick teams. And I'm just taking the 4-point favorites. There's a 10% chance I'm done after week 1. I'm taking Carolina. I'm taking Atlanta, Jacksonville, and Minnesota. I think those are the only 4 teams. Well, I'm sure I'll pick a 5th team, but those are my 4 favorite plays.
Because what's going to happen, guys, is that Carolina, for example, I think they're going to be kind of a good mix of what we talked about. Like they're probably going to be okay EV.
Oh, I hope they're bad. But
right. They're probably going to be okay on the EV side. Some people might take them, but I promise you that they're going to be very unlikely. I won't say unlikely, but but it's let's put it this way: it's good to take a shitty team. You know what I mean? Like, it's good to get rid of those teams that could end up, really, really bad. When you
Well,
have
not just a bad team, but these teams in particular, as it is right now, Jacksonville's second best play the entire season is week 1.
Jackson.
Their second best game is against the same exact team in week 15, where they're hosting that team.
Yeah.
I mean, Carolina, their second best play all year is week 1. Their second best is week 3. It's if you don't take these teams, if they are as bad as they're supposed to be or mediocre as they're supposed to be, these are teams you're never going to take unless you have to take them, unless you're forced to take them because there's not enough options left. And with an added week, you're gonna be a little bit more diluted when it comes to that last week because you've already taken one extra team. And believe me, it makes a big difference. Even one extra team is going to be a big difference. You take these bad teams early on, especially ones where they are their best play. Minnesota, their second best play the entire year is week 1. Their best is week 5. Atlanta, it is this is incredible. It's their third best play all season, is week 1. So these are, you hope you take these teams, you hope they win and hope that the handicappers are right and they're just as mediocre as they thought they would be. And then no one's going to take those teams later. And you got a huge, front head start on everybody who took these other teams.
This is probably a kind of a softball, but I'll throw it out there anyway. What would you say is some advice you'd want to give if someone was in a pool where they had to make double picks later on in the season?
I love the double pick pools. There's 2 types. There's the set weeks, usually 5 and 10. Some of them they start adding them at the end of the season. For the larger ones, some of them are conditional. I did well in a pool last year, didn't win, but if there are a certain amount of people left, conditional picks kicked in week 13 through week 17, and I think it triggered 3 times last year. It didn't end well, but we played perfect at least. I like to look at those weeks and sort by that and work backwards. So let's assume the double pick pools that most people would be doing are ones that are like 5, 10, and 15, or at least 5 and 10. Those are the ones I've seen the most. I would start at week 10 and then and sort by highest favorite. And by doing that, we see Pittsburgh. And then what I would do is, okay, do I want to save Pittsburgh for this week? If Pittsburgh had no games where they could be picked up until that point, I wouldn't want to have Pittsburgh for that game anyway. So I'd try to use them earlier. But if there was a lot of dark green in the weeks leading up to that team that's at the top, I want to save that team for that week. If there's a lot of plays for that team. I'm looking at the Colts have 2 good plays up prior to week 10. The Bills have like 5. A team like Dallas is really not a good one to take. They're probably not going to be picked very much in the weeks leading up to 10. So, if you get there, you talked about this earlier, there's no reason to save them because if everybody has them, you're not going to want to pick them anyway. So I'm looking for teams that I feel will be favorited by what I feel is a comfortable amount and more importantly is not available. And if I don't have anything there, then I'm just going to take a 3-point favorite and hope for the best.
And I'd like to take a step back again and advise conceptually on something like this. So if you're again fighting between, if you're using Survivor Grid or whatever, and you say, okay, this is a pick which is a good EV, but maybe they have high future value, so I may want to save them. I would say that if you're in a pool where you're going to have double picks in the future, I think it's even more important to save teams and be less worried about immediate EV, because all you're doing is, the future value of holding teams is so much more critical when you just have more picks to make, and you get double leverage in the future. And so that's what I would suggest with the double picks is in those types of pools, even more than the single pools, just really just pay a lot more respect the flexibility, I guess, of the future value save than in single pick pools.
And really just looking at, all that matters is when you're double picking. So if there are pools out there that
Yes.
double pick toward the end of the season, I have a note on one of my spreadsheets. I made this back in April. I have late season saves.
Yeah.
And I have 3 teams listed. I have Buffalo, Tampa Bay, and Baltimore. These teams have at least 3 good spots for those last 4 weeks. So the reason I write that down when I'm deciding on some of these earlier weeks, if I have if I have a tiebreaker, if I'm pretty neutral between Buffalo and anyone else, I'm gonna look at this list. I'm like, oh well, remember I kind of want to have Buffalo for later because I have double picks in this one. I'll just take the other team. But maybe I have a pool that doesn't have double picks. Well, then I might take Buffalo earlier on in that situation. But for the pool that I have double picks, I won't take Buffalo. So I'm spreading my picks out a little bit, and that's how I'm choosing maybe why I take one team in one pool and one in another. So I don't have all my eggs in one basket when it comes to the end of the season. I'm setting myself up for having different teams across my remaining entries by sorting. And that's an important thing. I know you do that. If you're doing a lot of pools, you got to be really careful not to force yourself into a situation where you might get to week 16 and maybe, yeah, it's great that maybe the Chiefs are favored by 10 points, but do you really want to put all your entries on one team? So what I do is I sort this out in advance as I'm going along, so I'm not in that situation. So I'll use some of my Kansas Cities early and I'll save some of them for late. If you were to look at Eric might look at my picks and like, what is Mike doing here? This goes against, what his, general strategy is for survivor pools. But I also don't want to be all in on a team. So that's how I'll do it.
Well,
is sometimes I'll use these teams earlier.
Yeah, what Mike's talking about is more of like kind of a portfolio management strategy. Where and that's for another day. Like I'll give you an example. Like someone could come into I manage a hedge fund. Someone could take a look at the stocks that I'm involved in, and it won't really matter because they don't know how one is supposed to be negatively correlated with the other. They don't know which is used as a hedge. This they don't know how it all kind of comes together. So when someone says, "Oh, who do I pick here?" Well, I don't know. Like, who else do you have? What else?
Yeah, that's always what it is. Well, who do you have?
How many pools are you in? Like this, that, and the other thing. So here's the deal, guys. So True DFS, I'm going to be doing this every week. Something with Survivor, and Mike's been very, very helpful, and maybe we'll have him come back on here on a week, from week to some weeks or whatever, just to kind of shoot the shit and talk about it. And also, we're gonna have a Discord channel just for a sub channel just for NFL, and maybe I'll have a sub channel just for Survivor if I get enough interest. And that's gonna be all depending on you guys. So you give us good input on this. And again, Mike, he's a teacher at heart. He teaches swimming. So I know that he would enjoy it or whatever. And we'll all kind of like take this journey together, anything else before I call this?
I think we're good. Thanks for having me on, Eric.
All right, no problem, Mike. It's funny, he's a swimming coach, and I used to teach tennis, and I'll leave with one more kind of thing about folding pre. People would always ask me, when I would teach tennis, like, Eric, I'm having so much trouble with my second serve. I'm like, well, you know what? You're blaming the wrong serve then. You got to do better with your first serve, so you're not always under pressure for your second one. So listen, Mike, thanks you so much. I will see you around, and I look forward to you doing more of these things.
Thanks a lot.
All right, see you
guys
later.
next time.
Let me pause recording, then I'll talk to you for a second. Hold on.
Yep.
Share. Stop
Perfect.
recording.